Welcome to part 2 of the build of the McLaren Honda MP4-30 of the middle season of 2015 by Ebbro in 1/20th scale. And as you can see, I've started to put together the full monocoat or central body of the car. Let me show you a few things that I put together here, or the rundown of what I did here. Of course, in the instructions you can see C30 and C29 and A15 and B5 were assembled to the main monocoat. In the next step, I took the engine cover, aided by a couple spacers, so B6 and B7 were put together with the two spacers here, C16 and 17, to form the actual rear engine assembly. And then all of it was put together on the car right here. And as you can see, we have a full body now. Pretty clever how Ebbro did that. You know, I guess because of molding these bodies, they're so intricate and technologically advanced that they had to do it in several sections. The other step I have here is some seam filling to do. In the pieces that I put on here, I've got a seam right along here that I need to get rid of. I want to get rid of the seams inside these pods on the sides here. On the top of the snorkel here, or the air intake, this seam stays. But this seam here, and there's a small seam right there, and down below there where it molds into here, have got to be eliminated, or at least close to being eliminated. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you want those areas as smooth as possible before you do primer and paint on the car. You got to be careful on some of these F1 cars, because some of them have seams that need to stay there, and on some they don't. So as you can see, we got some seam filling to do here. Now, what I'll be using to do this is this liquid surface primer by Tamiya. It's a real nice thin liquid surface primer that can be brushed on those areas. It has a lot of filling quality to it. Overall, what I like about it is that you don't have to overdo it, and you don't have to sand a whole lot of area. You can focus on getting this stuff put into those seams, let it dry, and then sand them smooth. It may require a couple coats, but it does work. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and add a few of these, fill in these seams that are on here. So I just take the brush, I run it across here. I've put it on fairly thick because this stuff will shrink because it's a lacquer-based filler. Get it right across there. There's a seam right here you need to go across. Right here. Just run around the down on the bottom too. This is going to be the fun one to try to fill and sand, but we'll get it there. All the way across. You let it dry, and then you apply it again. You apply it until you have the stuff built up enough to the point that you can sand it. Make sure you try to stay away from this seam right here, because that seam right there needs to stay there. Try not to float into the cracks there. You don't want to do that. This will make a much nicer presentation on the final model. I laid in there pretty heavy. Don't worry about the seam inside here. Right up in this area right here. The center camera pod goes there. This used to be a seam, but I've already started to begin to sand this. Now the sanding that I've done on this so far has been done with 800 grit. When I get the seams all done, smoothed out, with the 800 grit. I may even use 600 or something even coarser in the areas just to get it sanded down flush. But then I'll follow it up with 600, 800, and I'll probably go over the whole body with 1000. This is all prior to primer, mind you. Keep that in mind when you're doing this. Now we have to tackle this one right up front here, which is right along here. Just the back side of it. So we just need to lay it in there nice and thick. Let it dry a little bit, it'll shrink up, and just keep reapplying until you have an even area across there. What this gives you is a very good foundation to be able to sand against. Now I'm also going to go into this area here, right up in these pods that you see here. I'm going to fill those in nicely. Keep it away from that groove that's there, because that's supposed to be there. That little groove we're going to see edge of the pod. Those will be carbon fiber later, actually. In another video here soon. You don't have to go so crazy with it at the bottom, because it'll get filled in by a lot of paint. But you want to make sure this is going to get at least a nice coat of this liquid primer, surface primer filler I call it, because it's what it does. Those seams are all done so far. I may run a little bit of this across right here across here. I've got some pits right here in this central tunnel area, so I'm going to run a bead of this across here just to be assured that I have all of this done. Rest of it doesn't need it. It's pretty nice. I might run it a little bit right here. I'll do the whole thing. This also is great to look to check your work if you want, but that'll be nice right there, along there. Last but not least, again, this is the bottom of the car. It's up to you how involved you want to get, but this whole piece was glued in, as you know, in step 1 down here. It's A15 when it was glued to the bottom of the main monocoat. So there's some seams there that you might want to cover with this stuff so that you can sand it smooth. Got a groove right here. See, this groove does not need to be here. Needs to be sanded smooth. I'm not so concerned overall with this down here. You're really not going to see that in there. Along the edges right there, as you can see right here. You're not going to see that much around that edge. But I want to run a bead through there anyways, just to be sure. See? And I'll feather all that in. Like I said, this stuff is thick, but it's not super thick. That. Sorry if I'm not getting right in the camera, guys. Like I said, fairly new at this, but I'll get there. Nice seaming that across there. This stuff is very sandable. Actually, it sands off really easy, but yet we'll leave enough in there that it'll help getting everything level and smooth. And then the primer, base coat, and clear will take care of the rest. But the more perfect that you get it before all those steps, better ahead of the game you are. Remember, preparation is the key to a great paint job on whatever model you're building. A little bit of a seam right there that I want to get rid of. Over on this side as well, right here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is let this dry a little bit, all these seams. Let it cure a little bit. See if the seams are still there, or I don't think that they'll be smooth enough, and I'll put another coat of this stuff on. But like I said, what I like about this stuff is that I can control where I put it very accurately with a brush, and it's like a liquid filler. Much better than trying to use putty and making a mess and getting it all over your fingers and everything. This stuff does a nice job. I've used it many a times and it works out well. So that's all for this one. We're going to go ahead and let this dry. The next time you see the body, I'll have all these seams sanded, smoothed, and ready for primer. But I will go over how they came out. But what I'll do now is set this down, apply another coat or two of this surface primer, let it cure real well, and I'll start sanding on these areas and getting them smoothed out and blending in with the body. It's a key component on these F1 cars. 1/20th scale, 1/24th, or even up to 1/12th. The more time you spend on getting the seams eliminated where they're not supposed to be, keeping the seams in there that are supposed to be there. You might even want to use a scriber. I have a really expensive scriber here, okay? It's called an X-Acto knife. I use the back side of it for many of my scribing techniques that I do in most of my cars. Don't have a high dollar scriber, that's all I really use is one of these. It does work out very well. You know, you just run it across the area that you want to scribe lightly. A couple passes should do. Keep it within the lines as best as possible, because if you go out, you're going to leave a gouge in the plastic, which will have to be sanded down, and you'll have to rescribe your lines. But I do go over all of the lines of the car with a scriber normally on the key panel lines that I want to be very prevalent, so that they don't get filled in with paint and clear, or should I say get lost. So I'll scribe the panel lines, fill in the seams, and we'll get back with you after I have all that done. You'll see the results. Thanks for watching.